Nancy Pelosi didn't come today. We just had a conversation. And Dennis was not running for Congress right once, but he decided against it. We had a little interesting couple of days. So those of you may follow in the press. Many of you heard about Dennis's opinion some time ago about a member of Congress, that a Muslim member of Congress, that he should not use a Quran, but rather the American tradition of using a Bible. As I told Dennis, personally I didn't agree with him, but nevertheless, we saw an outrageous response from certain parts, and I would say extremist parts of the Muslim community, because there's many wonderful American Muslims who believe in the traditions of this country, and we respect them, and we believe that they are important citizens in this country. But this group decided to send out a press release to tell me that I should invite another speaker. Only one problem is they didn't call me. You know, it would have been nice. Hi, Rabbi, we have a problem. Well, I found out of it because I got an email, because every day I have a email which notifies me if there's any news about Chabad. Suddenly, I was the news. So, I decided that actually, when I saw the debate on CNN and watched it was really a strange debate. The guy saying, Dennis hates us, and he's saying, please tell me how. And I'm listening to this guy, is saying Yiddish, the whole thing didn't fit together. So I decided that really this was outrageous, and in my mind, for years, Jews have been blamed for things that simply are not true. And in ancient times, it was a very dangerous time. In Europe 100 years ago, in Islamic countries also 100 years ago. And this was called a blood libel. This wasn't actually a blood libel that somebody's put to death, but this is besmirching the reputation, in my opinion, of a great American and a great Jew. And I thought that the time had come to stop kowtowing to these people who play all kinds of games. Was yesterday with the reporter for the LA Times. I said, you know, I have a little problem with this group called the Council of Arab and Islamic Affairs, because two things. I said, number one, if you look back at their history, like 5 or 6 of their top leaders have been indicted or deported for connections to the Holy Land Foundation, other things involved with terrorism, and that gets me a little nervous. Number two, they put out some beautiful ads for September 11th, but why don't you ask them what they think about Hamas, Hezbollah, and other such wonderful groups of campers who are causing a tremendous amount of grief around the world. So if you notice that he asked that question to the spokesman from CARE, and she said, is that important? Is that important? Because immorality and violence against any human being is wrong, against a Jew, against a Christian, against a Muslim, whoever may be. And what CARE doesn't understand, and what America represents in Europe hundreds of years ago, we Jews know this in particular, experiencing the Holocaust and oppression through thousands of years in Islamic countries and in Christian countries, is that America, the idea was we settle our differences with dialogue and debate, that we agree to disagree. And we saw that remarkably last night, when the President of the United States walks into the Congress of the United States and gives the State of the Union, and the people, the woman who's the people who are the leadership of the Congress do not share his vision and not share his political agenda. But what exists between the two sides of the aisle was a sense of respect, because they all cherish the American way. And when a group of people want to intimidate us, but they don't have the courage to stand up for immorality and terrorism, that means they want to use the freedoms of America to abuse the rights of Americans. And for that, we have to stand up. To be very honest, I'm deeply concerned about Iran. I think it's a threat to the world. And I also was intrigued to hear Dennis's perspective. I never expected that in a microcosm we would see the same problem. Intolerance, masquerading as democracy, playing wonderful and expecting us to go along. But in a sense, we've come head to head with the issues that we have to discuss tonight. So my friends, it is a great honor and pleasure to present to you an American who cares deeply about the values of America, and also a Jew who's rooted strongly in Jewish tradition, has been a friend of mine for many years, and also a good friend of Chabad, Mr. Dennis Prager.
problem with the good people of the world. They tend not to fight. And it's when the good fight, I get really jazzed. So he has really done me a personal service by saying directly to the LA Times what needed to be said. The only thing that we both should say to CARE is a big thank you, because they helped publicize this talk in ways that you never I publicly wish to say, because there may be members of the press here, I will say this on my radio show, that I would be more than happy to engage in a dialogue, a debate, a conversation with anyone from CARE, anyone from any official or unofficial Muslim group, any place, any time. And I want to tell you during the course of this talk about my own background vis-a-vis Muslims in Southern California. There is so much to tell you tonight. I never come up with this amount of notes. Never. This is I had fewer notes at my bar mitzvah speech. This is a real rarity, but I have a lot I want to share with you. I'm sorry for coming late, because I know I don't like when Bill Clinton always comes late, and I emulate that sort of behavior. But when you come from the San Fernando Valley to Yorba Linda during rush hour, I'm lucky I'm here now, actually. 57 North is still not moving, so I thank God that I was going south. Thank you. Hello back there, for those of you back there. There are people in another time zone. I will tell you some things about Chabad and Rabbi Eliezer's work here after my talk, because I have a great deal of tremendous respect for this organization. The fact that he spoke up is not coincidental. By the way, I know there's a little whistling here. Anything we can do? Because I don't want to drive you nuts. Is that better?
Yes.
All right. Silence is really better, I guess. Okay, I have a big agenda here to talk to you about the greatest crisis in our time, and that is not global warming. Yeah, I tell you, I said on the air today, and I say it very often, as you know, the world is really upside down. When I saw the cover of Time and it said the greatest threat, and it's not terror, it's global warming. Do you know, I'm sure many of you have heard this, so forgive me, but do you know that in the 1970s, Newsweek had a cover on global freezing? A lot of you didn't know that, I guess, from your laughter. Isn't that remarkable? Somebody should really put that on the newsstand right now, or at all the colleges of the country, and see how quickly students would turn around immediately. The power of the media is so awesome, and it's a very frightening power. So they say global warming, so everybody is panicked on that. When they said global freezing, then everybody was panicked on that. By the way, you know my pet one, the greatest danger of all, the secondhand smoke. I didn't cover it today because of the President's State of the Union address, but so help me God, Alan sent me a news item that it also causes cavities. Some medical school somewhere. I mean, even if you don't like secondhand smoke, and I totally appreciate not liking it, but that it causes cavities, it's a little difficult to believe. I, oddly enough, think that the greatest danger of our time is that part of the Islamic world which believes that God wants them to kill people they differ with. That is what I believe is the greatest danger of our time. Let me say in advance, therefore, a few words about myself, Islam, and Muslims. I am the last candidate for the title bigot that I frankly know of personally. And I'm not here to tell you good things about me. I'd be too embarrassed to, and you know that's not my style. But I am the worst candidate for the charge of religious intolerance or religious bigotry. Many of you know this, because I'm sure many of you recall when I did my radio show, which I began on radio doing, and that is Religion on the Line. I was chosen to moderate the most popular show on religion, really, in America, on radio. 2 hours each week on ABC Radio Los Angeles, 2 hours every Sunday night, and I was the moderator for a rabbi, a priest, a minister. Different ones would come each week. And I was chosen in part because I was so fair to the religions. In fact, very often I would get a letter like this: "Dear Mr. Prager, I'm an evangelical Christian, and I was stunned to learn that you were Jewish. Dear Mr. Prager, I am a Roman Catholic, and I was stunned to learn that you were Jewish and not Catholic." And everybody thought I was their religion. Oh, Jews were also stunned. A religious Jew on the radio, I don't think, it doesn't make sense that he sounds coherent. I upset a lot of secular Jews often in that way. I was, in fact, very often I ended up, and again, you could bear witness if you heard the show, I would frequently defend a priest who was being attacked for being Catholic, or a Protestant minister who didn't have as good an answer on some Christian doctrinal issue, and I would help him out. And by the way, it went the other way too. My favorite moment in the history of Religion on the Line was one night a caller called in, and I don't know if he was anti-Semitic or not. I very rarely use that term to characterize people. Even if they are hypercritical of Jews, it still doesn't make them an anti-Semite. I allow people their little prejudices. It's okay. I mean, I did a whole show on Oriental drivers, for example. Nobody had a problem with it. Asians called in and asked why we drive so fast. So, one night, a guy calls in, and he starts giving the rabbi a really hard time about, hey, Rabbi, isn't it elitist and even racist for you Jews to think you're the chosen people? And the truth is, this was a rabbi who himself was not terribly comfortable with the idea. He was more on the liberal end of the theological Jewish spectrum, and he was queasy about the whole thing, and this guy kept giving him a hard time. Finally, the Catholic priest, Father Michael Mosita, says, "Dennis, may I speak here?" He says to the caller, "This is Father Michael Mosita, the Catholic priest. God chose the Jews. Get a life." I think I remember the guy saying, "Okay." So we all help each other. The Catholics help the Protestants. I help the Protestants and the Catholics. The Jews were helping this. That's the way it was. And it didn't mean we all, of course we didn't all agree. We all agreed we'd all be in the same religion, in the exact same pew. I mean, even Protestants don't agree among themselves. Protestants and Catholics don't agree. The theological differences are huge. But there was this sense of, I really enjoyed the clergy of every religion, and they enjoyed me. And my whole background is utter respect for whatever religion representative I mean, that's just intrinsic to me. In any event, you know my motto in life: there are only two races, the decent and the indecent. That's my motto. I don't divide the world in any other way. That's the way I divide. Are you good? I want to be on your side. I don't care what group you're from. It doesn't matter to me. It truly doesn't. And people know that. So for some, I must say, crackpot group to call me a bigot or intolerant is like, you might as well call me a sardine. I'm as close to being that as I am to being intolerant. I don't even have to battle. There are many flaws in me that I have to battle. But intolerance is not one of them. In fact, I opened radio to Muslims. They were never part of Religion on the Line. I deliberately sought them because it's a major religion. I sought their representatives. I had Muslims on so often on Religion on the Line that they invited me to various mosques to speak. I was beloved in the Muslim community during the period of Religion on the Line because I had such respect, and nobody had opened up a major media outlet like I opened up ABC Radio at that time, where I broadcast then. Now, of course, it's KRLA in LA, and I opened it up, and I was rewarded with their affection and respect and invitations to speak at the Southern California Islamic Center, one of the largest mosques in the United States. And I did so, and this was a non-issue for me, and it was a non-issue for them. So to come to this point where we have a group that funded largely by money from the Arab Middle East, telling Americans who is a bigot and who isn't, when the essence of this group's being is a bigotry, and the use of this word Islamophobe, it would make McCarthy cringe at calling people who weren't communists. I mean, anyone who has anything critical to say is automatically an Islamophobe. It's a terrible thing. And I didn't even have anything critical to say. That's the irony. The original article that I wrote that caused such an uproar in this country was not, and I even said it in that article, which had words that I regret having written, but nevertheless, I wrote in the beginning, this has nothing to do with the Quran or Islam. This is about the Bible. I am afraid, and I still am afraid, this I don't take back. I am afraid that we are losing what made America so great that a man who is a Muslim can get elected to Congress. That's what I'm afraid of, and what has made us great has been our specific value system. Value systems are what make countries great, mediocre, or terrible. We have had a great value system called, and this was not something that was used this term in Europe, it was something largely developed in America called Judeo-Christian values. Now, there are a lot of people who say to me, Jews and Christians, where did you get that term, or that term is a made-up term? Judaism and Christianity differ on such fundamental theological issues. The Trinity, incarnation, resurrection, Messiah. But of course, no one ever speaks of Judeo-Christian theology. They speak of Judeo-Christian values. There's a very big difference. And that is what has animated this country. 99 out of 100 Jews do not know, that on the Liberty Bell is a verse from the Torah. I would be happy if 1 out of 100 Jews knew that. I'm not sure that most non-Jews know that. I don't know if most Christians know that there is a biblical Old Testament, as in the Christian phraseology term, inscribed on the Liberty Bell. And yet the Christians who founded this country did so because they were deeply rooted in their Judeo origins. These were remarkable Christians. These were Judeo-Christians. They were rooted in the Jewish origins of Christianity. Both Benjamin Franklin and Thomas Jefferson. I knew for a long time Jefferson. Now I have learned Franklin as well. Both of them wanted the seal of the United States to depict the Jews leaving Egypt. And those are considered non-Christians, right? They're called deists, Franklin and Jefferson. To give you an idea about how Jewishly rooted in their thinking, in their theology, in their self-identity, the founders of this country were. So I say to my fellow Jews all the time, are you nuts? Do you not understand? Forget that it would be terrible for America. Do you realize how terrible it would be for us, this small minority of Americans called Jews, if America became secular like every other country like Western Europe? Would you rather be a Jew, I ask my fellow Jews, in Western Europe or in religious America? In secular Europe or in Judeo-Christian America? Jews have always had an honored place here, not because of our numbers, they've always been tiny, but because of the fact that we are the people of God in the Christians' eyes. This is the chosen people. America is regarded as the second Israel. There was a first, and there is a second. That is how it was, and it didn't replace the first. It was honored. Yale University's insignia is in Hebrew. Urim v'Tumim, the medallion that would be worn by the Jewish high priest in the temple, had those words on it. That is the Yale insignia. I wonder what percentage of Yale students have an idea what their insignia is about. You could not get a BA from Harvard till 1800 if you didn't know Hebrew. That is how deeply rooted it is. It's all news to people. But this is very important news. That's what bothered me. That for the first time since George Washington, another religious text is supplanting a Bible at a swearing in. That is what animated my first column. And I said to the Times that it was printed accurately today. You know me. It is very rare passion defeats reason when I speak. I'm very rational. I'm very calm. But I was so passionate, and nobody had raised this issue, and it was new for me too, and I wrote sentences such as, Keith Ellison should not be allowed to take his oath on the Quran. That was a mistaken sentence. I fully acknowledged it immediately. He is allowed to do whatever he wants. He can take it a person can take his oath on the phone book, a person can take his oath on nothing. I totally understand that. My concern for anybody who wants to be intellectually honest about the writing, my concern has been the whole time the place of the Bible in American life. If we don't get our values from that book, where will we get our values from? Now, I get letters, the ones that aren't cursing me, that say, just idiot. We get our values from the Constitution. And they're calling me an idiot. We get our, so if you know that on occasion, by the way, to those letters, I actually wrote back, would you like to come on my national radio show and tell me why I'm an idiot? You are invited onto my show. And they never respond. You know, they're very good at writing these letters, but I give them a national audience and somehow they disappear. But in any event, the notion we get our values from the Constitution. Where did we get our values before 1789? I would love to get an answer from someone who says our values are from the Constitution to that question. Where did we get our values prior to the Constitution? Or were we value free until that day in 1789 when the Constitution was ratified? Where does the Constitution get its values from? Constitution gives no values. It gives laws and rights. It doesn't give any values. The Soviet Union had a beautiful constitution. It guaranteed freedom of speech, freedom of assembly, freedom of religion, freedom of press. It was the only constitution in the world that banned anti-Semitism. One of the most anti-Semitic countries in the world, and the Constitution banned it. But there were no such freedoms, because there were no values to have people live by them. A constitution is a piece of paper if people don't have values to take it seriously. And anyway, what values do you get from the Constitution? American A reads the Constitution and sees a complete right to abortion, and American B sees that there's nothing to do with abortion. Forgetting the question about who is right, they both can't be right. They're both reading the same book. We didn't abolish slavery in this country because of the Constitution. We abolished it because of the Bible. The abolitionists didn't say the Constitution says X, Y, Z. No, they said the Bible says God created every human being in his image, and that includes African human beings. That's why slavery was abolished, because of our value system, and everyone acknowledges this. There's no way around the fact that the abolitionists were deeply religious people rooted in the Bible. So, what do I get for arguing that, this is not insignificant that for the first time since George Washington, another religious text replaces the Bible? Bigot, intolerant, and far worse. Now, I don't care. I have very thick skin on these matters. What matters is that there is no dialogue. All there is name-calling. It's as if the point I wish to make is unworthy of discussion. To merely raise it is to be some religious fanatic. You know how many letters I get? You Christians, you're ruining the country. I love those. I love them. I'm sending back a picture of me in a yarmulke and a tie. It's as if the very issue is unworthy of sophisticated human beings' attention. After all, you went to college or graduate school, you know secularism is what unites us. But look at Western Europe. I don't want to be like Belgium and Holland and Norway and France. I don't want to be. I don't want it as an American, and I certainly don't want it as a Jew. Jews in France are warned. It's the largest Jewish community in Europe is in France, in Western Europe. They're warned, do not wear a yarmulke outside. Do not wear a Jewish star necklace. You may be beaten up. In Britain last year, 4 times the number of Jews were beaten as the number of Muslims. I have the article here from the Daily Mail. 4 times the number of Jews. Jews didn't blow up any London subways, and they get beaten up. And it's not generally Anglo-Brits who are beating them up. Maybe constitutions and secular values aren't all that powerful in the final analysis, are they? Maybe religious values are more powerful, as indeed they are, and that's why I'm worried. But you can't even have the discussion, or even more amazingly, listen to this. The USA Today had thank you, Rabbi, the entire opinion page, the op-ed page, was devoted to an attack on me a couple of weeks ago by a full professor of constitutional law, George Washington University, Jonathan Turley, who's on the contributing board of editors of that. Now, remember, this is a contributing columnist or editor at the USA Today, a full professor of constitutional law, George Washington University Law School, and calls me a Judeo-Christo-fascist. This is a new term. This is the first in history. You are in the presence of the first Judeo-Christo-fascist. Is the man serious? He's not serious. This is why they don't know in academia the gulf between academia and middle America. They don't realize how big the gulf. We don't take them seriously. They're unworthy in so many instances of being taken seriously. This is a good example. That's not dialogue. Judeo-Christo-fascist. And then he writes there, Prager is entirely wrong when he says that there was about when I say that there was no religious text that ever substituted for the Bible. The Bible, he said there were 4 presidents who didn't swear on the Bible. There was no Bible with Franklin Pierce, there was no Bible with John Quincy Adams, no Bible with Teddy Roosevelt, and no Bible with Herbert Hoover. Okay. And then what happened? I'll tell you why he was wrong, and they printed my letter in USA Today saying why he was dead wrong. But, of course, here's a professor at George Washington University Law School, writes total nonsense, total misleading nonsense, and then columnists around the country pick it up, and then in almost all the papers of the country I read about, oh, this guy Prager said that this was the first time since George Washington, but as Jonathan Turley, a professor at George Washington University, reminds us, it wasn't used in Franklin Pierce, Quincy Adams, Teddy Roosevelt, and Herbert Hoover. Prager is this ignoramus. Why didn't he do his history? Well, I'd like to tell you about those 4 cases. John Quincy Adams didn't use a Bible. Of course, none of them substituted another religious work, so on that alone I'm right. But John Quincy Adams didn't use the Bible, not because he didn't think America's values didn't come from the Bible. On the contrary, He was so religious, he didn't think that the Bible should be used in a secular event. That's the only reason. So using him as an example is just dishonest. It gets worse. Franklin Pierce. So Franklin Pierce did not swear on the Bible. That's true. He affirmed on the Bible. Okay? Because he wasn't an oath taker. Now, who was telling, do you think Jonathan Turley was being honest when he says that Pierce is an example of no Bible? Didn't swear on the Bible, yet he affirmed the Bible. In fact, we even have, it was either in his case or Herbert Hoover's case, we even know it was open to Proverbs. They actually know what chapter of Proverbs it was open to. Teddy Roosevelt was sworn in as governor of New York State, used a special family Bible. Sworn in second-term president, used the exact same Bible. But he's given an example by this Professor Turley, and papers all over the country quoting him. Teddy Roosevelt didn't use a Bible. You know why? What happened? Do you think he became an atheist between governor of New York and second-term president? Do you think he had a change of mind? He was sworn in within 2 hours of McKinley's death. McKinley had been shot. That's why. It was in a private home, and the truth is we don't know whether he used a Bible or not, but that was not the uppermost thing on his mind. He knew America needed a president immediately. He was on a family vacation, called into Buffalo, New York, somebody's house, and sworn in. And there was no press available, so we really don't know what he used. Not a very honest example, Teddy Roosevelt, is it? And then Herbert Hoover. Herbert Hoover was, again, because he was a Quaker, he affirmed and didn't take an oath, but it was on the Bible. And those are the 4 examples a professor uses in USA Today to show that Prager is all wrong. And how do you answer this? Should I write a new letter to the Houston Chronicle and to the Denver Post and to the Seattle Post-Intelligencer and to the Miami Herald and every place else that then quotes Turley? See what happens? And at least I have access to the media. I have a national show and I tend to get published. What about somebody else who just gets vilified unfairly? But I'm not the issue. The issue is the issue. And look at how it isn't addressed. Why did I ask myself, why did this cause such a stir? I've written 1,000 articles in my life. All of a sudden, why did this one? Because I hit the most sensitive nerve in American life. Are our values religious or secular? And those who believe they are secular believe with the same degree of fervor in secularism as the most religious person in this room, Jew or Christian, believes in his or her religion. That's what you need to understand. It is, they believe in secularism, and they are as anti-religious as you perhaps might be religious. Their religion is secularism. And to say that America gets its values from the Bible, and to say that it should have accompanied the Quran, there was a precedent for this. An ambassador to Bangladesh was a Muslim American, and God bless him, he brought his Quran. Fine, it's a non-issue, but he brought a Bible as well. Folks, let me tell you something. If I lived in a Muslim country where the Quran had been the text of its values, that was as free and tolerant and open and kind and opportunity giving to non-Muslims as America is to non-Christians, I would bring a Quran to my swearing in along with my Bible. I would honor the text that made it possible for me to have such rights in that country. So I am angry that he, for the first time in history, decides, I don't need a Bible because I am Mr. Diversity. And all the diversity crowd cheer him on. Yahoo, no Bible. But I don't cheer that on. If I were an atheist, I wouldn't cheer it on. I am not cheering it on because of my religiosity. I am cheering it on for utterly rational, secular reasons. This country is the best country ever made for people of every background, and it is because of that book. So I don't want to lose that book. Is that fair? Is that fanatical? Is that fascistic? is all about. Then come this group CARE, Council on American Islamic Relations, and completely Muslimize, Islamicize an issue where Islam was of tertiary importance, not even secondary. Had he brought a Bhagavad Gita, I would have said the same thing. It didn't matter to me. Had it been a secularist bringing the works of Voltaire, it would have been this. And I wrote that in my article. I wrote it. It doesn't matter to me. It happens to be the case here is the Quran. But it could have been any other text. My worry is vis-a-vis losing the centrality of the Judeo-Christian value system in this country. It's a pretty legitimate worry, given the secularism and the secular constitutions that are all over the world, and they don't make a country like ours did. I mentioned to you the Soviet Constitution. There was a great joke about in the Soviet Union. That was my field of study, and the two funniest genres of humor in my life have been Soviet dissident jokes and American lawyer jokes. It's interesting. They are the two funniest series. The lawyer jokes are very funny, and Soviet dissident jokes were very funny. And the reason is bitterness causes humor. That's where humor comes from. Happy people are not that funny, generally speaking. I mean, you know how pro happiness I am. But if you look at comedians' lives, they're generally fairly miserable. And so lawyers cause misery here, and the Soviets cause misery there. I'm generalizing. There are lawyers who don't cause misery. Yeah, they're all. So there was a Soviet dissident joke that went as follows about the Soviet Constitution. What is the difference between the American Constitution and the Soviet Constitution? And the answer was, the Soviet Constitution guarantees freedom of speech. The American Constitution guarantees freedom after speech. All right. So now we know what it is that I'm worried about. I'm worried about the direction of our society and where will it get its values from if it doesn't continue to get them from this Bible. Then we have the other issue here, and that is the specific issue of Islam. Now, I wrote, as by sheer coincidence, my column this week was on the question, can we judge religions? And I began my column, and again, you can testify to this if you are at all a regular listener. From 9/11 to the present day, I am asked by callers, Dennis, is Islam a violent religion or a religion of violence? And I have answered from 9/11 to this day, I never judge religions, I judge practitioners. Those are the exact same words I have used since 9/11 to this day. Again, I'm a very poor candidate for Islamophobia, which is a disgusting term in any event, but I'm the wrong guy, as it were, because I've said in the latest column, because it's too complex to judge religions in many ways. After all, if somebody said to me, Dennis, I want you to morally judge Christianity, I would have a very perfect right, a legitimate right to say, well, which Christianity? The Christianity of the Christians of the National Council of Churches, or the Christianity of focus on the family, an evangelical, generally evangelical and traditional Catholic Christian group. They have no values in common. They have none. They both believe in Christ. They both believe in Christian doctrine, but they share no values. An evangelical or a Protestant or a traditional Catholic share far more values. I mean, it's no comparison with an Orthodox Jew, with a Mormon, than with a fellow Christian, even Protestant fellow Christian of the National Council of Churches. So which Christianity are you asking me to assess? Which Judaism, for that matter, the Judaism that I believe in, or the Judaism that some left-wing Jews believe in? They claim to believe in it. I spoke to a rabbinic conference. I don't even want to say which denomination because it's not critical, but at one of the major denominations, but a non-Orthodox denomination. And I spoke about how I believe that the Torah clearly wants men and women to be married, and while we must always show love, and I mean it sincerely, love, compassion, justice, kindness to a gay human being, the Torah wants us, Judaism wants us, I think God wants us, to restrict marriage to a man and a woman. And rabbis lined up wearing yarmulkes and saying to me, I'll never forget one rabbi, very, very respectful, Dennis, as strongly as you believe that the Torah wants marriage man, woman, I believe that the Torah wants same-sex marriage. It's on tape. He believes that. And I believe he believes that. I don't believe that there was an inauthentic syllable that came from his mouth. So again, when you say assess religion, I have to know which do you mean. So that's part of the reason, as I write in my article, that I have never found it easy to say, well, this is my moral judgment on religion X. If I had a talk show in the year 937, I don't know what I would have said about Christianity at that time. Especially if a bunch of Jews had just been killed on Easter Sunday for killing Christ. So I don't know what I would have said. So it's very, very important to understand why I give that answer and why it's much better generally to assess practitioners, which I do all the time, and I am worried about a percentage of the Muslim world. I am. For totally understandable reasons. If you are a good person, you have things to worry about. And I will give you just a sampling of what one is to worry about. At the same time, there are people, and I've had some of them on my show, like Robert Spencer, who say that the origins of a lot of this violence do in fact emanate from the holy text of Islam itself. And they provide many verses to support their point. The only problem with that is, and I'm being as open as I can with you, it's possible, you know the devil quotes scriptures, you know that line. It is possible to take your text, your holiest text, and advocate bad things, and it's possible to take your holiest text and advocate good things. That's why I tend to judge practitioners. But right now in this world today, there is only one group of religious practitioners that right now scare me. And they are a segment, albeit obviously by percentage, a small percentage of Muslims in the world. I don't know how you cannot be. Thomas Friedman, who is a liberal, man of the left, the leading foreign policy columnist in the United States, probably, the New York Times foreign policy columnist, his column today was about his fear. He's worried. He said, I don't understand why do Muslims stay silent when Muslims are blown up. Now this is Thomas Friedman. Will he be called an Islamophobe? Or does CARE not wish to alienate the New York Times? Which I am convinced that is exactly why they won't do it. But he would qualify by the criteria of that group. After all, he said a critical word about Muslims. That ends the issue, doesn't it? But it's a very fair question. 80 Muslim college students are blown up, and there is no protest. There's nothing in the Muslim world. An Islamic regime in Sudan is in the midst of genocide against blacks. And I have not seen, maybe I'm unaware, and I ask this honestly, but I've not seen one Muslim demonstration. What troubles the non-Muslim, and I beg Muslims to hear this, I went to yeshiva till I was 18. It's many years in traditional Jewish Talmudic academy. And I studied a great deal of Judaism, and the rabbis were clear about one thing. There was one thing that was drummed into my brain, that the greatest sin, and I always had a kick about doing this topic on religion on the line, what's the greatest sin? And I would ask the priest, the minister, and the rabbi, and get their answers. And then they would say, all right, Dennis, what do you think the greatest sin is? That was after 5 years, and I had earned their respect for the first 5 years. Who cares what this kid thinks? I was in my 30s. And I said, well, I'll tell you, I was taught that the greatest one is doing evil in God's name. known in Hebrew, in Judaism, as Chilul Hashem, to desecrate the name, literally. I'll give you an example, which is not about evil, but it gives you an example of how strongly the rabbis of my yeshiva felt this. About 8th, 9th grade, rabbis took the boys aside. The boys, you shouldn't go to dirty movies. It's a sin to go to a dirty movie. But if you go, take a yarmulke off. That was a very powerful lesson. Look, it's bad enough that you're sinning. Why do you drag Judaism into it? So built into us was the deepest sense that if you act religious, you really better act good. Because you're not just carrying your name with you, you are carrying God's name, the Torah's name, Judaism's name with you. Any religious person in this room knows this. Christian or Jew, you represent much more than you when you announce you are religious. So when I saw, and I was literally speechless when I saw over and over those who would shout or chant Allahu Akbar, Allah is the greatest, and slaughter a human being as if he were a sheep. So I would put it in Jewish terms and imagine how would I react if a rabbi with a yarmulke and a beard saying the Shema, the credo of Judaism, Hear, O Israel, the Lord our God is one, and in the midst of saying the Shema, took an innocent human and slit his throat. I can tell you that it would bother me more than if any other religious person or secular person ever did it. The anger would overwhelm me and overwhelm these rabbis and overwhelm Jews across the spectrum. We would go nuts. Imagine if Christians saw this, some Christian in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Ghost, and then slaughter an innocent human being. Can you imagine what the Christian reaction would be? Left to right. This doesn't represent us, this is disgraceful, etc., etc. This is the ultimate blasphemy. Where are those voices in the billion-strong Muslim world? That's the biggest question. That's what we're worried about. And then CARE and another Muslim representative said, "Oh well, Mr. Prager." So I wrote that question in the Los Angeles Times article in let's see, when was it? November 2005. I wrote 5 questions non-Muslims would like answered. And the first one is, why are you so quiet? And the answer is, Mr. Prager obviously doesn't read our website. That was the answer, because we condemn terror. But thank you, Rabbi Eliezer, because you caught them today. Okay, so what do you say about Hamas and Hezbollah? We don't comment on specific groups. It's not relevant. Well, if you can't identify, it's like saying I'm against murder. What do you think of Al Capone? I have nothing to say. And one then starts to question your real opposition to murder, doesn't it? And it's not like, you see, I also got a lot of, look, it's a Western thing that people protest to the press or they march. And that was told to me for years. This is not something Muslims do. You in the West, you protest and you take your ads out. But then, my God, there were cartoons depicting the Prophet Muhammad in Denmark, and I did see a lot of protest in the Muslim world. So it's not like when they're really bothered. Here and CARE. I got this, the best one. This is really I gotta find this. This is now you know what happens on the show, because I have a stack like this in the show. When I'm saying, folks, hold on, this is the nightmare of a talk show host. You now know why. But no, this is very important. It will give you, here it is, ready? So CARE is in it's not relevant. We don't take a position on Hezbollah and Hamas. But look at this from October 18th of 2006. CARE condemns Tunisian ban on Islamic headscarves. So apparently they're very capable of CARE, of being very specific about what they oppose. So they don't oppose Hamas, a bloody, torturous organization calling for the annihilation of Israel. They don't oppose Hezbollah, calling also for the annihilation of Israel, and for that matter, for the Islamicization of Lebanon, and a tool of Syria. No. But the ban on headscarves in Tunisia, that really tipped CARE off. Yeah. By the way, I condemn the American media blanket for their supine position. They're lying down before the facts about CARE, treating them as if they are another civil rights organization, and always identified as such. Their track record is awful. It's morally pathetic. But you wouldn't know that. I salute the LA Times today. I really do, for at least noting what they said with regard to Hamas and Hezbollah, and it's already made the national blogs. Little Green Footballs, arguably one of the 2-3 most important websites on the internet, has a whole thing about the LA Times article on my speech tonight, and how CARE their answer to the LA Times, that they were finally, as it were, exposed for, they condemn terror generically but never specifically. So what does one do with all of this? This is from the London Evening News, 7 August 2006. Almost a quarter of British Muslims, growing up in Britain, among Brits, in a free society, say the 7/7, the July 7th, that's their 9/11, 7/7, with the bombings on the trains and buses. Almost a quarter of British Muslims say the 7/7 bombings can be justified. That's Muslims in Britain. That's their fellow citizens who treat them perfectly decently, who have accepted them in from Islamic countries that couldn't support them. Then Britain supports them, Britain feeds them, Britain gives them medical attention, Britain gives them schooling, and that's the quarter that is open to saying to an interviewer. It's hard to believe that a lot of people didn't want to say to an interviewer, right? Yeah, I support the blowing up my fellow British citizens. To raise these points is what? Is it wrong? Is it morally wrong? Is it to pick on a group? Is it unfair? What is one supposed to do with all of this data, which comes at you on almost a daily basis? I wrote a piece, and why don't you take a smoke while I look for it? I'm sorry. Take a drink. That's what. Take a drink. Let me see if I could quickly find this. I wrote a piece. Oh, I think I did. Hold on. Yeah. Amazing. I wrote a piece, and I just listed in it what happened between in 5 months. I promise you, I give you my word of honor, I only picked the 5 months because they were the 5 months preceding the article. I could have picked any 5-month period, and just a survey on the internet, it's not exhaustive. The Guardian in the United Kingdom, which is a left-wing paper, April 14th, 2006. A German court sentenced a Turkish man to more than 9 years in jail yesterday for the honor killing of his sister. The murder of Hatun Suruku, 23, who was shot several times at a bus stop in a Berlin suburb last year, shocked Germany. Forced to marry a cousin in Turkey as a young girl, Ms. Suruku later broke with her Turkish-Kurdish family in Berlin and was living independently with her 5-year-old son, to the intense disapproval of her relatives. Public outrage at the murder was exacerbated when some teenage boys, this is the key to this article, to this report, public outrage at the murder that's in Germany, was exacerbated when some teenage boys at a school with many pupils from immigrant families reportedly openly applauded the killing, condemning the victim for having lived, quote, like a German. That's April 14th, 2006. April 15th, International Herald Tribune. Men using machetes attacked worshippers in 3 Coptic Christian churches in the port city of Alexandria, Egypt on Friday morning, killing an 80-year-old man and wounding at least 6 other people. Jerusalem Post, April 18th, 2006. An Egyptian state-controlled newspaper praised Monday's suicide attack in Tel Aviv, which killed 9 people and wounded dozens, calling it an act of sacrifice and martyrdom. A state-controlled, that's Egypt, a moderate country. Daily Telegraph, United Kingdom, August 14th. In Britain, Abdullah Ahmed Ali, 25, and his wife Kosar, 23, were arrested in connection with the plot to blow up airplanes flying across the Atlantic. According to Scotland Yard, the Muslim couple planned to take their 6-month-old baby on the suicide mission, using their baby's bottle to hide a liquid bomb. Ottawa Citizen, July 27th. We've got Hezbollah fighters running around in our positions, taking our positions here, and then using us for shields and then engaging the Israelis. These were the words of a Canadian UN observer written days before he was killed by Israeli bombs. So in fact, Hezbollah was using UN people as human shields, just as written by this Canadian who was then killed. CNN, June 5th, Canadian authorities rounded up a group of 17 Muslim men and boys suspected of plotting to bomb major buildings in the Toronto area. Daily Telegraph, Australia, August 26th. In Australia, Islamist propaganda has convinced many residents their suburbs are being overrun by Islamic extremists. The Saturday Daily Telegraph revealed an escalation of anti-Semitic behavior. Jewish university students were targeted and forced to hide their traditional skull caps beneath baseball caps to avoid abuse, while attacks on synagogues have increased. Newsday, August 26th. A 3rd suspect detained in a failed attempt to blow up 2 German trains is a Syrian national. German and Lebanese authorities are each holding one of 2 young Lebanese men accused of carrying the suitcase bombs onto trains in a Cologne station on July 31st. Officials say they could have caused many casualties and set the trains on fire. In addition to that, there is, of course, Iran, as the rabbi mentioned. The head of Iran has advocated genocide against the Jews of Israel. I mean, that's what he wants. And there was a piece by Benny Morris, who was a secular, left-wing Israeli historian. I believe it was in the Jerusalem Post? Did you happen to see that? Was it Haaretz? I don't know, it doesn't matter. Wherever it was widely reprinted in the West. And he said that there was no question in his mind that Iran is planning a second Holocaust. And this is a secular Israeli who is on the left. So there was no other possible way of reading this. And that he says all they need are a few missiles to work. They sent a few dummies to fool Israeli counter anti-ballistic missiles, and they sent a few real ones. A few real ones take care of Tel Aviv, Haifa, Jerusalem, and whatever, Ashkelon, whatever. And so a few will fall on Iran. So what? He doesn't care. Any more than Hitler cared about if Germans died. What mattered to Hitler was the Jews died, not whether Germans died. Okay, that's the head of Iran, which just had a conference on Holocaust denial. Sudan is an Islamic regime that is engaged in genocide against the blacks.